Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this hearing of the Parks and Recreation Committee, the Women's Committee, and your title is very long, Mr. Van Bramer, the Cultural Affairs and something else. My name is Barry Grodenchik. I have the honor of chairing the Parks and Recreation Committee for this term of the New York City Council. I and Councilman Van Bramer are going to waive our opening statements for the time being in terms of, just to save some time right now. And we are going to hear first from the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs, good friend to many of us and former director of the Queens Museum, and he's eager to go, I see that. So I know that you have to be somewhere. So thank you. We will speak a little later. If the clerk can swear him in. And his.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before these committees today?
Yes, I do. I'd like to just start by thanking you all for the brevity or quickness of getting to my testimony. So I will read my testimony. Good morning, Chairs Van Bramer, Grodenchik, Rosenthal, and members of the respective committees. I'm here to testify on behalf of the Department of Cultural Affairs with regards to today's topic, improving gender and cultural diversity of monuments located in city parks. I'm joined by a number of colleagues from my agency and from other agencies here. I want to start by saying that the subject of today's hearing is something that the Department of Cultural Affairs, along with colleagues throughout the city government and community partners, have dedicated an enormous amount of time and energy to in recent months. It's a major priority for us, and we thank you for the opportunity to highlight some of the ongoing efforts to address the historic lack of diverse representation in our city's collection of monuments, statues, and public art. Since the Percent for Art program was created under Mayor Koch in 1982, Department of Cultural Affairs has completed more than 300 permanent public artworks for our open spaces and civic buildings. Thanks to legislation sponsored by Chair Van Bramer and others, and signed into law by Mayor de Blasio in 2017, Percent for Art has recently been updated. For the first time since the program created, we have updated the budget formula to expand the funding for art commissions. We have also worked with you on legislation to enhance community's role in the process. Several monumental works have been commissioned through the Percent for Art. From Alison Saar's remarkable sculpture of Harriet Tubman in Harlem, to artist Gabriel Corin's depictions of Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X, both also in Harlem, to a monument commemorating Dr. Ronald McNair in Brooklyn, and an installation at New York Public Library's Schomburg Center honoring Langston Hughes. These are examples of incremental progress we've seen in recent years towards a more diverse public art collection. But since 2017, we've been committed to addressing the historic lack of representation for women and people of color in a more urgent and deliberate way. Following national protests related to the Confederate monuments and other representations of bigotry and bias in the public realm, Mayor de Blasio established the Mayoral Advisory Commission on City Art Monuments and Markers. Its charge was to review controversial items on city-owned property. As DCLA's commissioner, I served as co-chair of the Monuments Commission alongside Darren Walker of the Ford Foundation. We hosted public hearings in all 5 boroughs to listen to what New Yorkers had to say about representation in our city's public art collection. More than 500 individuals attended these public hearings, with nearly 200 offering verbal testimony, and an online survey received more than 3,000 responses. The Commission considered several pieces of art on city property that were subject of sustained controversy and worked to formulate recommendations for addressing these in a considered, inclusive way. Following the Commission's report issued in January 2018, we embarked on a number of new efforts to make New York City's public spaces more inclusive, welcoming, and representative of our shared values. For one, Mayor de Blasio ordered the removal of the statue honoring J. Marion Sims, located at the edge of Central Park across from New York Academy of Medicine. Sims performed medical experiments on enslaved Black women, and this statue was the focus of sustained community opposition in East Harlem for many years. The statue's removal in April of 2018 marked the beginning of our efforts called Beyond Sims to work with the local community to commission new artwork for the site. We've co-hosted several community discussions to keep the local residents engaged in the art commissioning process and to articulate what the community wants to achieve through this new commission. This past Saturday, we hosted the first of 2 artist selection panels at the Schomburg Center. An artist will be selected at the next panel, which will take place in the weeks ahead. They will be expected to work closely with the community as they design this new monument. Also in response to the Mayoral Monuments Commission's report, the city's Public Design Commission hired 2 archivists to undertake a 1-year extensive review of the city's art collection. If we want to address the issues of representation in public land, we first need to have a clear sense of who is currently represented. The first phase of this project will result in a public online database of outdoor monuments and memorials and is planned for completion in August 2019. We're moving ahead with several fronts while that effort is underway. The Mayor's Monuments Commission emphasized that we should focus on an additive approach, finding ways to honor people, histories, and voices that are currently underrepresented or not represented at all in our city's public spaces. One of the most exciting and concrete outgrowths of this effort is She Built NYC, an initiative spearheaded by First Lady Shirley McCray and Deputy Mayor Alicia Glenn to commission permanent artwork honoring women. This is an area of particularly stark and troubling statistics. Of 118 unique individuals represented in commemorative sculptures in city parkland, most of which date from the 19th and early 20th century, just 4 are women. An open call for nominations of women or groups of women that the public wanted to see honored yielded thousands of responses and an enormous amount of enthusiasm for the project overall. Building on this public engagement and momentum, in November, we were thrilled to be part of the announcement that Shirley Chisholm would be the first woman to be honored as part of She Built NYC. The trailblazing public servant from Brooklyn will have a monument installed at the Parkside entrance of Prospect Park by the end of 2020. This is just the beginning of our efforts to cultivate a more diverse collection of city monuments, and we plan to announce more in the near future. Following the Monuments Commission report, the mayor also committed to honoring Indigenous people of New York. We're in active conversation with members of the community on ways to accomplish this important gesture to honor the people who lived here before Europeans arrived. As you can see from all this activity, this is an exciting time to be involved in the work of bringing new ideas, energy, and voices into the process of commissioning public monuments. We look forward to sharing updates about our new commissions with you and general public in the near future. Your support is an essential component of these efforts. As we hope today's testimony makes clear, the city has demonstrated its strong commitment to the values and objectives that are reflected in the proposed legislation, and we believe that there are ways we can work together to achieve them. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify before today's hearing.
Thank you, Commissioner. To open up questions, I'm going to call on Chair Van Bramer. We've been joined by Joe Borelli of Staten Island and also Peter Koo from the Borough of Queens.
Commissioner, I thought you were staying till 10:30, no? Okay. Well, let me just say, I think that's highly unusual, and we understood that the commissioner had a hard stop at 10:30, but did not realize that that meant that he would refuse to take any questions. I realized that Kendall and others are here, but I think that abrupt turn of events is surprising and highly unusual and unfortunate, but nevertheless, we will persist. So with that, why don't my co-chair speak and have some other folks testify.
Thank you, Chair Van Bramer. We've also been joined by Councilman Rafael Salamanca from the Great Borough of the Bronx. At this time, Matt, do you have testimony?
No.
Okay, so we don't have any testimony. So I'm going to let now my co-chair Van Bramer open up the line of questions this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just confirmed with our counsel that we had in fact been told that the commissioner had a hard stop at 10:30 and did not know that he would refuse to take any questions here at this hearing, which is galling to me. But I believe we have to swear in the others who are going to testify today, so I'll hand it over to our counsel to do that.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony today?
I do.
I do.
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
For anybody that'd like to testify, I have a bunch, but if you'd like to testify this morning, please, if you haven't done so already, please see the Sergeant at Arms. Thank you. Chairman Van Bramer.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, you know, I want to thank my co-chairs, obviously, Chair Grodenchik and Chair Rosenthal, who will be joining us. And there she is, Chair Rosenthal, for this very important hearing that unfortunately the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs could only stay for 13 minutes at. I want to say that the remembrances that we have in our city are incredibly important, and it's also incredibly important that they accurately reflect our society. Clearly, we have not done so, and the efforts to correct that are worthy and important. And that's why we're having this hearing in part. Our parks and our city's civic structures deserve to have monuments that speak to who we are. And obviously, with a city that is over 50% comprised of women, with less than 2% of the monuments reflecting that important part of our population. So some efforts are underway, but more are needed, and we have some pieces of legislation that have been introduced. And were the commissioner here, I would continue to ask him, as we did in private, but it's important that these conversations be transparent and public as well. Where we're at, and I think, Kendall, that responsibility for the Department of Cultural Affairs falls to you, but obviously Parks and the Public Design Commission and others are represented here as well, so we'll get to those folks. But I sort of am. So I guess I would say, Kendall, maybe it's helpful if you introduce yourself, but where is the administration, and why is the administration so tentative about this issue? There seems to be a lot of trepidation on the part of the commissioner to talk openly about this issue, which is one that I am sure in his heart, I know Tom Finkelpearl, that he is a good and decent and progressive person, and wants, you know, only the best of things to happen here. But there seems to be a lot of trepidation on the part of the department to talk about this, both in what you've done and what you're doing. Maybe you can clear that up right here, since the commissioner had to run out of the room literally after he gave his testimony.
Okay. And yeah, so I'm Kendall Henry, the director of the Percent for Art program, and we're tasked with commissioning any of the works that move forward as permanent art or monuments. And I don't know that there's trepidation. I mean, we support the spirit of the legislation, and I think like when we worked with the Percent for Art, new legislation with Percent for Art, there's a lot of conversation, and we welcome that. So,
but where are you at in terms of meaningfully addressing the inequity that exists? Where is the department, where is the commissioner in that debate and then that discussion? Is it a funding issue? Is it a process issue? Where are you? And do you think that it is a worthy goal for 50% of our monuments to be those of women? Is that something the department believes or does not believe?
yeah, we support the legislation. We support the idea of it, of course. And we are starting with for example, with the She Built initiative, and right now we are working on the Shirley Chisholm, like the commissioner mentioned in his testimony, and we're approaching that in many different ways in terms of having equity within the artists that we look at, in terms of the artists, the panelists that we convene to select those artists, and so we're going to continue that.
Are any of these projects funded, and if so, where is the funding coming? Which agency might it be located?
So, as part of the mayor's initiative, he had funded the initiation of new monuments, and we're using that funding, so it does exist. So, for example, the Shirley Chisholm monument we do have funding for that. We've just been working on the Beyond Sims, which is the project we're using to replace the J. Mariam Sims that was removed. We have funding for that as well, and so we do have funding for those projects, yes.
And how much funding was that?
The mayor has allocated $10 million in the
$10
next
million.
4 years, yes.
Over how many years?
4 years,
Over 4 years.
yes.
And do you have a sense of how many statues you can erect with that $10 million?
It's hard to say. A lot of things go into play in terms of what the cost of a monument might be, from the location and having the site preparation, the materials that's used, the scale, all these things go into play in terms of how much it costs for a monument. So it's hard to say, but a lot of general scale would be at least $500,000 and above for any given monument. So it's hard to tell how many we could do with the $10 million that we do have.
And of the $10 million, is some of that part of the Percent for Art program, or is all of that new money?
That's all new money.
All new money, none from, okay. So with the Shirley Chisholm statue in particular, obviously you must have a cost estimate because that's fairly far along, right? And that's obviously a beautiful thing, but how much, do you have any sense of what that will cost?
So for that monument, we've allocated up to $1 million for the project. And so right now the artists are working on their proposals, and they're going to come in with the proposals on April 1st, and we'll get a better idea of how much they'll cover for that amount.
And what's the coordination between all of you with respect to any one of these, right? I mean, if it's on Parks property, obviously you've got Parks, and then PDC, you have to weigh in here, right, and essentially approve any of these, right? So maybe each of you or one of you can talk to the coordination, but PDC, at a certain point, you have to vote, your board has to vote to approve anything, or you could vote to disapprove, I suppose.
Right, that's correct. So as a matter of process, we wanted to be clear that Justin Moore,
introduce yourself,
Executive Director of the Public Design Commission. We wanted to be clear that the PDC does not initiate the proposals, the projects. That happens through the various city agencies based on their jurisdiction. So Parks for Parks Department, Transportation for Streets and Plazas, et cetera. So that the initiating, the commissioning of the artwork happens through that process and through the agencies. Once an artist is selected and a design has been developed, it moves forward to the Public Design Commission for an early conceptual review. There's often a kind of an iterative design process with feedback on proposals. We see nearly 1,000 projects a year citywide, but typically only 1, maybe 2 that are artworks of this nature.
Matt Drury, Director of Government Relations, New York City Parks. Specific to our role as sort of, in this case, property owner with jurisdiction over the actual site, we work very, very closely, obviously, with Department of Cultural Affairs as they're going to administer. And, in the future moving forward, as other projects that come out of the Monuments Commission or She Built NYC specifically, if those are, determined to be cited, or if it's to be explored that they're to be cited on parkland, we'd obviously work very, very closely with both DCLA, and then as the project moves through the approval process, PDC as well.
And so let me just be sure, Kendall, I got you right, because you said you support the legislation. So does the Department of Cultural Affairs, are you prepared to say, and are you saying on behalf of the Commissioner and the administration that you support the legislation that is before us?
We support the spirit of the legislation, and this is something that we've been doing already. So yes.
Okay, so supporting the spirit and then yes are
supporting the spirit.
2 different things. The yes at the end of it would seem to indicate that you do, but the spirit is a little bit less concrete, I suppose.
Not necessarily. Support the spirit, but again, with more conversation and back and forth and speaking and discussing is important.
Got it. Okay. Look, I think it's a little unfair that you're, as Kenny is approaching you from behind, I think it's a little unfortunate that you are put in the position in this very strange circumstance where the commissioner literally ran out of the room. So I'm not going to belabor the point, just to say that it's very, very disappointing, and I'm not directing that to you, but to the commissioner, really, and the administration, who told us a certain set of circumstances would exist here today, and then when we bypassed our opening statements intentionally so that we could actually hear from the commissioner and address some of the questions, because we knew he only had until 10:30, that after he read his opening statement, he literally ran out of the room, and that's completely unacceptable. And this is my 10th year as a council member, and I have never seen that happen in 10 years. And we count the number of committee meetings that I've attended over the 10 years, and it's well over 1,000. And I've never seen a commissioner run out of the room like that. So just shocked that would occur. So I have more questions, but I know that we have other chairs to hear from and other folks who may want to ask questions while we have the team assembled here.
Thank you, Chair Van Bramer. I am going to deliver my opening remarks now, and we had put them off, and I am disappointed as well that my friend Tom Finkel-Pearl could not stick around to answer at least a few questions. I want to put that on the record. I want to thank Councilwoman Rosenthal for being the inspiration for this hearing, and I want to thank Chair Van Bramer as well for agreeing to hold this very important hearing. Our city prides itself on many things, including its rich history and cultural diversity, both of which have helped to cement our status as the capital of the world. One of the many ways we commemorate that history and diversity is through the dedication of various monuments, statues, and memorials. Sadly, if you were to take a look at the statues that honor historical figures, you would not come away with a feeling that they reflect the city's diversity. In fact, there are over 250 sculptures on city property, 125 of which are based on historical figures, and of that total, only 5, yes, 5 of those statues depict women, not counting Alice in Wonderland's statue in Central Park. Since that number is so small, it is easy for me to name them all. There's Joan of Arc in Riverside Park. Golda Meir is on Broadway and 39th Street. Gertrude Stein is located in Bryant Park. Eleanor Roosevelt is also in Riverside Park. And Harriet Tubman is on St. Nicholas Avenue in West 122nd Street. I want to note that we as a city, we're doing all we can to welcome our diverse population. I represent one of the most diverse districts in Queens, which is the most diverse county in the United States of America. But it is sad to say that when it comes to our monuments, we would be hard-pressed to be less diverse, even if we were trying to be. The process to approve any work of art on city property can be involved and arduous. Basically, if a proposed monument would be on Parks property, involves Parks Department reviewing a proposal for any art installation that will permanently be installed on public property. DPR works with sponsors to refine a proposed design and determine a location, and if it is approved, determine whether the proposal complies with other city rules, such as those issued by Landmarks Preservation. After that, they make a formal submission to the Public Design Commission. PDC will then hold what is referred to as a committee meeting with stakeholders of the proposed installation. At the committee meeting, agencies can receive feedback on design proposals before the proposals are submitted to the full commission, although the PDC does not vote on projects and does not accept public testimony at that time. Ultimately, if the committee meeting results in a positive outcome for the proposal, a public meeting will occur at which public testimony is presented and the full commission votes. I am not making this up, I assure you. Under PDC's guidelines, PDC discourages monuments or memorials for people, places, and events that have been recognized as significant for less than 20 years unless they are of exceptional importance and will not consider monuments to living persons. Perhaps it is time we consider changing some of the guidelines to allow for far more diversity. The two bills that we are hearing today attempt to adjust the process with the goal of greater inclusivity in our monuments, and Councilman Van Bramer has talked about that. We'll hear from Chair Rosenthal in a second, and then we will hear from Councilman Salamanca as well on his bill. It is long past due that the city engage in a holistic approach to addressing our diversity deficiency when it comes to our monuments, and I'm pleased that we have initiatives like She Built New York and Create New York City to lead us in the direction. However, there are some issues and questions regarding these initiatives that we need to address today. And again, I am disappointed that Commissioner Finkelpearl left because he is the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs. And I would have loved to hear his insight. He has been on the cultural scene in this city for decades. I look forward to examining all of these issues today, and I welcome all of those who have come to testify. At this time, I would like to call upon Chair Rosenthal for her opening statement, and then we will hear from Councilman Salamanca.
Thank you so much, Chair Grodenchik. I share your concerns about the commissioner making a statement and leaving. I'm sure his staff is incredibly able, and we're all, of course, happy you're here, but it makes a statement, I think, that the commissioner chose not to be here when he had ample time to change his schedule. It was our understanding that he was going to be here at least for half an hour, delivered his speech for 15 minutes and then left. It reflects to me a lack of engagement with the public. This is the opportunity here at an oversight hearing. This is an opportunity for the city to say, enough is enough. Going forward, all statues, and we're going to lean in and make a lot more, will be of people of color and of, non-white men. I'm really disappointed that he would get up and leave. I'm going to read my statement, but I'm sorry it will fall not on the commissioner's ears. And I'm sorry that I would like to think this issue is being taken seriously. I would like to think that it's not because of this hearing that you had a meeting to discuss possible artists on the Sims statue on Saturday. So here we go. I'm Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, Chair of the Committee on Women, and I'm pleased to be here with my co-chairs, Barry Grodenchik and Jimmy Van Bramer. Public statues and monuments are selective windows into our past. The decisions of what to do to commemorate are reflective of our society's values and aspirations. As my colleagues have mentioned in their statements and comments, in New York City, women, trans, and gender nonconforming individuals are underrepresented, if at all, among public statues and monuments. And in fact, there are presently only 5 monuments that honor historic women in our public spaces. In Central Park, in my district, there are over 20 statues of white men, but not one statue of a female historical figure, although there is a historically accurate statue of a dog. People of color and those with disabilities fare no better, and it's time to right that wrong. And it shouldn't be so hard. But for nearly a decade, including the last 5 years, community members, I should say, not the last year, but 4 years prior to that, community members in East Harlem fought to have the statue of Dr. J. Marion Sims, known as the father of gynecology, removed from Central Park for over a decade. This should not be so hard. Dr. Sims earned this moniker while brutally experimenting on Black women and white women, although they may have been given anesthesia. All of them were poor, and that's why they could be experimented on. And of course, it was without their full consent or even, for the most part, anesthesia. In my mind, the Sims statue unjustly honored the racism, misogyny, and oppression that tragically is a part of our history. Now, I am grateful to the Harlem community for initiating this fight, and I was proud to stand with them last April as we pushed for and eventually witnessed the statue's removal. However, let's be clear, the podium on which it stood still stands. And when I get to my questioning part, I'd like to hear from you what the plaque on that podium says, because it certainly doesn't make reference to any of the crimes that our dear doctor committed, and does not speak to the exact next steps of what's happening. So it's been almost a full year. And from the perspective of the public, all we see is a pedestal. It's very disappointing. Monuments matter, and they are prompts for discussion about history and justice. They are opportunities for one generation to transmit a sense of cultural history, meaning, purpose, and values to the next. As a city, we must aim for thoughtfulness and inclusion. We cannot stand for the erasure of the contributions of so many dynamic and monumental individuals. Just as importantly, we cannot hide or cover up difficult and at times shameful truths about those that we've memorialized. And I just want to give a shout out to the artist who posted a picture of her art of 3 women in hospital gowns on a shade with blood all over their hospital gowns, and put that as if that were above the pedestal. I thought that was brilliant and reflected history accurately. That's my 2 cents. So much work remains to address the challenge to bring greater honesty and equity to our public monuments. Evolving cultural monuments challenge us to reconsider what was previously deemed acceptable and virtuous. We saw this most recently with the spray painting of #MeToo on the unconditional surrender statue in Florida, memorializing a forced kiss at the victory parade at the end of World War II. This public dialogue and questioning is overdue, must be welcomed. We must continue to shine a spotlight on this. And today's hearing is an opportunity to learn from the public about how we can bring greater diversity to our public monuments. We refuse to continue ignoring history and herstory. And I'm grateful to all who wish to change and enter this dialogue. I want to thank Ned Terrace, my legislative director, as well as the Committee on Women staff for their work in preparing for this hearing, Brenda McKinney, our general counsel, Chloe Rivera, legislative policy and analyst, and Monica People, our finance analyst. Again, I was hoping for a lot more. I was hoping we could have a declarative statement from the commissioner, making it clear that that he is full on willing to no longer put up statues of white men until we are in an equal position of people of color and women, and that we would lean in to make that happen. And $1 million here and $1 million there just doesn't cut it for me. Thank you, Chair Grodenchik, for the time to speak.
Thank you, Chair Rosenthal. I'm going to call on Chair Van Bramer now to read the pieces of legislation, and then we will hear from Councilman Salamanca. We have been joined by our Majority Leader, Lori Cumbo, who recently celebrated a birthday. And I want to wish her a happy birthday because I didn't see her that day, and I am not going to ask her how old she is.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, let me just say thank you to Chair Rosenthal for that incredibly passionate and important statement, and of course for her ongoing work on behalf of all women and people in the city of New York. So just so that we are clear and it's on the record, Intro 1114 is a local law related to creating a task force to examine the monuments, statues, public art, and historical markers on city-owned property, sponsored by Councilmember Inez Barron. I'm happy to be the second on that piece of legislation with her. I know Councilmember Barron feels very passionately about this and helping us to understand the current landscape and artwork that might be inconsistent with the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion that we hold dear in the city. Introduction 1439, and you'll hear from the prime sponsor, Councilmember Salamanca, and of course, Chair Rosenthal. That is a local law that would require the Public Design Commission to ensure that women are depicted in at least 50% of approved works. And I believe that Councilmember Salamanca is here and will speak to this important piece of legislation now.
Thank you, Chair Van Bramer and Chair Grodenchik and Chair Rosenthal. Today I'm excited that you will be hearing my bill 1439, which will require the New York City Public Design Commission to ensure that 50% of all work or works of art installed or built in city-owned land depict non-fictional women. And just to point out some details here, of the 150 monuments or statues in city-owned property, there's only 5 that are of women. In Central Park, there are 12 dozen statues, and none of them were of living women. But you have Alice in Wonderland, Balto, the dog, Mother Goose, and Romeo and Juliet, which I find it unacceptable. And so my bill, 1439, will require that moving forward, any statues, arts, any sculptures being approved by the department, the Public Design Commission will require that 50% of these monuments or statues are of women. So with that, I want to thank this committee for allowing me to have this bill heard.
Thank you, Councilman Salamanca. We have been joined also by Councilwoman Diana Ayala from the Borough of Manhattan and also the Borough of Bronx. She crosses the river, so to speak. At this time, I would like to call upon my colleague and co-chair of this hearing, Helen Rosenthal, to ask some questions.
Thank you so much, Chair Grodenchik, and thank you so much, Councilmember Salamanca, for your legislation, and Councilmember Barron as well. I just wanted to, of course, thank you for being here. And I want to start with what is the plaque that's on the podium that was left behind?
The cons.
I'm going to refer to my colleague here, Kendall, from DCLA, to talk a little bit about the efforts that are underway, what we call the Beyond Sims project.
So I'm aware of the efforts that are underway. I'm just asking a simple question. What are the words on the plaque?
Yeah, I don't have that text.
Podium?
I apologize. I don't have that text with me, and we can get back to you.
That's okay.
I don't have that text with me. I'd be happy to get that to you. I don't have that with me.
Okay, we're going to be here for like at least another hour. Do you think that there's someone back at the office who might have it, who could text you the words, and you could report on that at this hearing? Surely there was someone who made it, who's back at the office, who can just sort of forward over what the plaque says.
I'm reading off a photo here, so it's a little fuzzy. So, as I believe it reads, by order of Mayor de Blasio, NYC Parks has relocated the statue of Dr. James Marison Sims to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, where Sims is buried. Plans are being developed to commission a new monument on this site. I believe that's what reads on the plaque there.
And I would ask that you update that plaque as the community asked on that April day in 2018 to be a little more informational about why the statue is no longer there. And I think that in and of itself is an important message to the people who walk by, right? Because right now it's just a pretty boring description. Technically it's true, but this is a community that fought for 10 years to get it down. Really, you couldn't come up with one or two empathetic words, or is Parks just refusing to play a role?
I think we're being deferential to the process that's in place now to replace the work. I think the history of what happened, I don't want to speak for what, the artist that gets selected or the process that will play itself out, but I think we presume that will obviously be an important context that's provided when the work's replaced.
I think that's waiting too long. That's my opinion. It's been a year. It could be 5 more years before a statue is put up. You haven't told me a deadline. Unless you have a deadline of when it's actually going to be done. But that still, again, doesn't get to the point of leaning in. I mean, if the mayor was willing to have a commission to study whether or not these statues were going to stay up, he can't take the extra mile of making a statement on the podium of a statue that was taken down clearly because it represented the racism and misogyny of that time. You made the decision to take it down. No?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can take this back to our respective agencies and discuss
be
interim
clear.
signage.
On that day, this is what the community asked. So, I mean, taking it back now, it's a little cute by half, right? I mean, you knew. I want to hear, this is what I want to hear. I want to hear that you'll work with the community this month, come up with the wording, and have it installed by the end of next month. Why is that so hard? You were able to have a plaque installed on that day. So could you do that? And could you get back to this committee on when you expect an appropriate statue to be placed there?
Can I?
Yeah, sorry.
It's insulting to the community. You need to be aware. And I mean, it troubles me that you weren't aware, but it is insulting to the East Harlem community, the plaque that's up there now.
Yeah. So since the statue was removed, we have been working with the East Harlem community boards and a couple of the organizations that fought the many years to remove it, to come up with a process that would guide how we look at what replaces the Sims statue. We started with what we call a healing process.
So I'm just asking 2 things. This is not a time to filibuster, and we have so many more people who want to ask questions, so I don't want to eat up all the time. I'm asking you 2 things. Would you be willing to go back to the community board this month and ask them what language they think would be appropriate on the statue for right now? My guess is they're writing it as we speak. And would you commit to installing that plaque on the podium in the next 2 months? May I ask you, I think it's appropriate and good that you have a process for the replacement, and you should continue that process. But you did not talk to the community about what the replacement plaque should be in the time being, and I'm asking that you make a commitment to talk to the community board that's very well versed in this issue and agree to put what they want on the plaque.
I mean, I think I'm prepared. I don't want to speak for my colleagues here, but I think we're prepared to absolutely hear more from the community and make sure that we can get, we can explore interim signage. I'm not prepared to, I can't, in terms of the conditions and the timeline, I think it's hard to do that, but I think it's absolutely important to engage. They've been engaged up to this point, and
Can you
we're
make
absolutely
a
willing to
commitment
work with
to
them on
have
that.
the actual replacement statue up in a year?
You can't build a bathroom in a year.
So the process takes a little bit of time, and just going through.
And keep in mind, you've been going at it for a year. So yes, it takes time. Although the community, I think, knows what they want now. That's a whole nother story.
So
You
again,
want to say 2 years, 5 years? Just tell me what it is. What year did you put the money in the budget for?
the budget is not in a specific year. It's
I mean, that's how the budget works.
okay, but anyway, so the process is that we speak to the community first, then we discuss what a healing process, then what they think, what some of the issues that they want the replacement artwork to address. Then we had a artist selection process on Saturday where we narrowed down a list of about 54 artists to about 5. And these artists are now going to meet with the community again to sort of hear a different, from individuals within the committee that we formed. Then those artists are going to go back and have about 8 weeks to come up with a proposal. Then we're going to do an exhibition of those proposals to the community, and then the artists are going to. So it's a very long process. Just the fabrication of any kind of work takes a number of many months. Just the review process that the piece has to go through with PDC takes at least 2-3 months.
Okay,
so it's just,
I really,
standard.
I mean, I apologize for interrupting, and I know you're doing your job, and this is really just an institutional dialogue. I'm really kind of a nice person, and I'm sure you are too, most of the time. But I just want to say I'm really disappointed that you can't answer my question. And I think the community, I would just want to reflect that I think the community is sick of, there being one reason or another for not just moving on this. I'm glad you have a process. I would ask that you speed your process up and that you know the end date of your process. And I would, at least ask for a commitment to that. Maybe getting back to us with an end date.
We'll get back to you.
Mm-hmm. I just want to compare that process actually to what's going on with the selection of the Shirley Chisholm statue that She Built NYC says is its first project. So in that situation, you put out an RFP, and there are going to be panels reviewing it, but in the RFP, it doesn't even mention Shirley Chisholm. And I'm wondering why and how you expect there to be responses that will answer the call for Shirley Chisholm at that site. Unless I'm wrong, you tell me.
Yeah, so we did an RFQ, a request for qualifications, for any artists who would be interested in doing monuments in New York City. And so that's how we began with the Shirley Chisholm project. And then we issued the RFQ to request for specific artists who specifically wanted to work on Shirley Chisholm's project.
That's gone out or not yet?
That has been out before. It was been out for about a couple months. And so we've passed that process.
So
we've passed that component of the process.
You first did Who Wants to Do Monuments? And is that part of also what we're talking about for the replacement of the misogynist, racist Sims statue?
Yeah.
Was that part of just Who Wants to Do Monuments, and you got 54 back?
So when we first started the She Built initiative, we didn't have specific women identified yet, but we just wanted to make sure that the word was out that we were looking for artists. Then when it was announced that it would be a Shirley Chisholm monument, we reissued the RFQ, identifying that this particular woman will be memorialized. And so we extended the RFQ. So there was two phases of the RFQ, one for general and then one for specific to Shirley Chisholm.
When's that due back?
So that was done already. So with the Shirley
How many
Chisholm,
responses did you get for the Shirley Chisholm statue?
So we got about 134.
For Shirley Chisholm in particular?
For the whole, we just opened it up again. So we started with a general, and then we said Shirley Chisholm will be the first one. So if you wanted to add your name to the general list, then please submit your information. And so that was done, it was closed, I think, on the the 21st of December. And we had our first panel looking at a lot of these artists on early January, and we selected 5 artists who are now working on the proposal for Shirley Chisholm, the Shirley Chisholm Monument.
Over 100 applied to that, and now you have 5 who are working on the Shirley Chisholm, and over 54 applied for the Sims statue, and now you have how many working on it? 5 as well?
We literally just selected them on Saturday.
Yeah.
And they have not even been identified or contacted yet. But yes, we were looking for 5 proposals for that
Okay,
monument.
got it. Okay, well, I'm glad you're looking at Shirley Chisholm now as well. Could you explain to me I'm just going to ask two more questions and turn it over to my colleagues. And this is about the relationship between She Built NYC and Women.NYC and DCLA. Is Women.NYC a government entity?
I don't have any information on Women.NYC.
Who does She Built NYC is an arm of what government entity?
She Built NYC is an initiative.
Is what?
It's an initiative.
Under the jurisdiction of which agency?
So as the Department of Cultural Affairs Percent for Art program, we're tasked with commissioning the work. So the She Built initiatives was, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was initiated by the First Lady and the Deputy Mayor as a means to really focus on the women's monuments. And so we are tasked with that initiative to commission the works.
So the money comes out of what budget?
The money comes out of the budget that the mayor has identified, the 10 million.
Where is it stored right now?
The money is, each year we get about a $2.5 million within our budget to realize those monuments.
I'm sorry, I just want to articulate it. Our is Department of Parks or Department of Cultural Affairs?
Department of Cultural Affairs.
Okay,
Yes, Cultural Affairs.
so Cultural Affairs, every year, if I were to open up the budget last year, the year before, there's always 2.5% of some number that's in your budget that's for art.
So 2.5 million for the next 4 years.
2.5 million, my
Yes.
bad. Oh, so is this additional funds that have been put in your budget? You said yes.
That's correct.
What's the usual amount that's in there?
In Cultural Affairs budget?
Yeah.
I don't know our budget like that, I'm sorry.
So right now, or 5 years ago, if I were to say, do you have any money in your budget for monuments, historic plaques, what would you have said?
I would say no.
You would have said 0. So this is brand new money
That's correct.
that's been put in, and the first fiscal year is what year of the 2.5 million?
Yeah, I'll have to double check, but I think it's 2018? Yeah. Yeah, it's this current fiscal year, 2018, 19.
Sorry, you have to get back to me as to which fiscal year?
And I just got the information, it's 2019.
2019, fiscal year 19, you have 2.5 million. Fascinating. And how are you spending that 2.5 million?
We started with She Built NYC Shirley Chisholm and the Deion Sims.
My guess is, I think the answer to the question is you're going to roll over what you don't use into the next year, or does it go away? Because you're not spending 2.5 on She Built this year.
It does roll over, yes.
Okay. And you've spent maybe a couple $100,000 on putting out RFQs.
No,
Is that soft money, or is that part of the capital?
that's not capital, that's soft money, that's not capital.
So you're not spending any of the 2.5 this year. and we have a guarantee from the administration that's rolling over. Will that roll over as the full 2.5 in fiscal year 20 or roll over evenly?
As far as I know, it's going to be rolling over.
Evenly or into simply 2020, fiscal year 20?
I'll have to get back to you on those details.
Okay, it's important, and just given that, you know, you have one more slice at this apple by June, if you could forecast how you're going to spend the money instead of putting it in evenly over 4 years, I think it's part of the statement that you're making to the public. And the idea, it's my 2 cents. And so just to confirm, there's no relationship between DCLA and women.nyc? Or is there one with the Commission on Gender Equity? Just trying to see who's going to drive the bus for She Built NYC after this administration leaves in 2021, when, by the way, 2/3 of the money will still be left unspent in the budget?
I will get back to you on that information.
It's pretty important. I mean, is it going to stay in DCLA? Could the next mayor take it out? How quickly are you moving to get this work done to guarantee it'll happen under the de Blasio administration? I'll take that as a we haven't thought about it.
Oh,
I apologize.
No, I was just thought you were just keep talking, but we have a tentative schedule, and yeah, we are trying to complete those, at least the She Built NYC, Shirley Chisholm, and the Beyond Sims by the end of 2020.
So again, here's why it's so important, because I don't know what website you're talking about as having put out the RFQs or whatever. Right now on women.nyc, it talks about if you're interested in creating a public monument that honors women's history, please apply. Deadline to submit is December 21, 2018, and there's a link to apply. There's no update for that whatsoever. I'm looking through it. So that's why it's so important what the coordination is. I'm not just asking to bust your chops. I'm asking to understand how the public could know that you're serious in terms of doing this. It's not coordinated with the group that's putting out the call.
So that RFQ was put out to select for the artwork that we've already selected.
Yeah, look, if you could put out some sort of diagram explaining how all this is connected and how you're going to guarantee that this money is going to be spent on statues for women, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think Chairman Van Bramer wants to make a quick statement, and
Yes.
then we're going to get to Councilman Borelli.
I just want to say, because Chair Rosenthal is rightfully asking a lot of really important questions, but I know you, Kendall, to be a very thoughtful and intelligent administrator of the Present for Art program. But this is the problem with this administration, is you're forced to take the hot seat and to receive a lot of questions, some of which you don't actually know the answers to, and you aren't expected because you're the director of the Present for Art program of the Department of Cultural Affairs. But we had the commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs here, and he literally ran out of the room at 10:13. Literally ran out of the room not to take questions. This is not supposed to be a really difficult and intense hearing. It's about an issue that virtually all of us agree on, right? That virtually everybody in the administration could agree on. But this hearing, from your perspective, is bungled because the commissioner runs out and leaves really good folks like you, Kendall, and others to get grilled on questions, many of which you don't know the answer to. And it's unfair to you, and it's unfair to us, and I don't know why this administration, whoever in this administration, told Commissioner Finkelpearl, you are not to answer any questions about this topic. It's outrageous, and I'm not directing this to any one of you. You all are doing your jobs, representing your agencies, in the case of Justin, who runs a department here in this administration, but it's completely unnecessary for us to be in this position, for the chair Rosenthal not to be able to get answers, and for you, Kendall, to be put in the position, quite frankly. Tom Finkelpearl is the commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs, should be here to answer these damn questions, and I just had to say that on the record before I know other council members have questions.
Thank you, chairs. We have been joined by several council members. Councilmember Mark Levine from Manhattan. I got to take my glasses off. My leader, Karen Kozlowitz from Queens, Andrew Cohn from the Bronx, and Francisco Moya from the Borough of Queens. At this time, from the far reaches of New York City, Councilman Joe Borelli.
Thank you, Chairman Grodenchik. My question's for the Public Design Commission, and it's a little bit off topic. You know, the other agencies always blame you guys for everything. So what would you say you guys do?
Yeah, so the Justin Moore Public Design Commission Executive Director. So Public Design Commission is essentially the design review agency for the city. We look at capital projects from a number of different city agencies. So an agency could be Parks Department, it could be Transportation. We'll develop a design proposal that's done by architects, designers, and goes through that agency review process, you know, internal to the agency. Once that agency is confident that that's a project that they can advance and really build, they submit to us at the Design Commission. We review projects at different stages, so it can be a very early review, what we call a conceptual level of review, and give feedback so that the agency, as they're developing the design and construction project, can incorporate the commission's
How much time does your review process during a design, say of a park, how much time does your review process normally take?
So we have a calendar where we review projects once a month. So the agencies have a whole pipeline of multiple projects, and they submit monthly several projects typically to the Design Commission for review in that cycle. The commission meets, gives feedback, and then that information goes back to the agency. In some cases,
what is the criteria for requiring PDC approval?
The city charter.
No, I'm sorry. You know, if I was building a tot lot in a playground, does that require PDC approval?
Anything that is a permanent installation, a permanent change to the design of the city's property that is visible is submitted to the PDC review on city-owned.
Do you think that at any point that sometimes becomes unnecessary? Like if I'm building a tot lot, and the tot lot is almost identical to every other tot lot in the city of New York, is it sometimes redundant? I mean,
so we review several tot lots, playgrounds, multiple projects, and those are reviewed. The large number of them are reviewed and approved on one meeting cycle. There are cases where design review and design oversight is important, that there can be specific site conditions, a number of different...
Just explain what an improvement would be then. If you review it and improve it, what's an improvement? Like how do we, so DEP lays a sewer pipe, right? That's how we measure some success. We built a sewer. PDC makes an improvement to a tot lot, what would that look like?
An improvement?
That was you said improvement.
Yeah, a change to a park or playground is, and we
So,
call that an improvement.
I think she's still here. Councilwoman Rose, I can't see her. She has a park in her district, Faber Park, and the park designers and the Parks Department, and I believe Councilwoman Rose, all happen to like a basketball court that's on the waterfront. And like I can close my eyes and I can imagine, you know, kids imagining themselves like LeBron just in this awesome basketball court. But now I'm told that PDC wants parks to move the basketball court away from the water. Like, is that like an improvement?
I'm sorry, this related to monuments?
No, but like Lord of the Flies, I have the conch, you know? I'm asking the questions.
Lord of the Flies.
It's a good book. But I'm just trying to get to the bottom of because PDC doesn't testify at a lot of hearings. So I'm just trying to see, in other words, why does PDC as an agency care if the community is happy with a basketball court on the water? Why is there an added step an unnecessary step. I think sometimes parks has a whole bunch of problems, but sometimes they hire great landscape architects to design parks, and yet we add this extra step where now another group of architects, designers, folks on the commission will say, well, we don't want the park on the water. We want the basketball court on the water. We want it, 50 feet inland. And now that starts a whole nother level of designs. I mean, is that improving?
So we, as was mentioned, kind of a matter of process earlier, we obviously look at public input as a part of our review process, and projects do have public hearings as a part of the PDC reviews. So all of that is factored into the Commission's review and design recommendations.
So I read your annual review, and I noticed one of the projects that were highlighted on Staten Island was historic Richmond Town. Have you ever been to historic Richmond Town?
I personally have not been to historic Richmond.
So I'll describe it for you in my amateur architectural knowledge. It's a collection of houses that were built roughly from 1670 to the early 20th century, mostly Dutch colonial houses through, say, Italianate villas. Yet when it came to the PDC to design a sort of a storage area for carriage horses, somehow we were left with a design that resembled Quonset huts, like Vietnam-era huts that were multicolored. Every other building on the property is a historic home. Is that improving it? I mean, this is in the annual review as sort of a win, like it's one of the projects you guys highlighted. How is that a better design than an adjacent storage facility, which is functional, but for example, has sort of a faux historic look?
Sorry, the Commission has a sort of a diverse group of people that review designs. They have different backgrounds and different sort of understandings of what makes a project or a design appropriate to its context.
I get that, but again, we have these storage facilities that are now leaking. That's a whole separate issue with DCA. And I just want to figure out how someone, and why it's an improvement, to build something that doesn't resemble in the slightest bit a historic village, and put that right in the middle of a place where people come to see a historic village. It just doesn't make sense to me, but I'll stop there. I see Barry. Barry giving me the stink eye.
Could I say something?
Yes, please.
Sorry, I'm Carrie Butler, Deputy Director of the Public Design Commission, and I've been there for about 13 years. And we don't design the projects. We do make recommendations. I mean, I don't personally, but the commissioners who are professionals do make recommendations. And there are instances where you can have a contemporary design fit into a historical context quite successfully. I think that, I think Favor Park was resolved, if I'm not correct, but I'm happy to look into that for you. There are cases where our commissioners who have expertise in architecture and landscape architecture and civic design and transportation may question the layout of parks. And when we get feedback from, there may be that we just need some more explanation and then it's resolved. So, I do think that things like tot lots are very quickly reviewed, and we don't spend a lot of time trying to, make people do revisions on projects.
But then do you think there's a little bit of mission creep for the agency, where you've expanded beyond, sort of the and I don't mean to sort of bring a platonic argument of aesthetics, but what is art? But is there a mission creep where this is an added step to almost every single project?
I don't believe so, but I'm happy to work with all the city agencies to try to expedite their review processes. We have worked with people on, using prefab, using prototypical designs, like reviewing things in expedited manner. We are willing to do that.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Borelli. We'll now hear from Peter Koop.
Thank you, Chair Grodenchik and Jimmy Van Bramer and Rosenthal. Thank you for coming to testify. I support the two new bills that will improve gender and cultural diversity of monuments put into the New York City parks and other areas. So I will give you a simple question. In my area, since it has changed a lot, right? Now we have more Asian Americans than other groups. So many groups in my community, they come to me, they say, hey, council member, we want to put a statue of Confucius in the area. And Confucius, all of you know, is the most famous educator, teacher, philosopher, so it's, they're very proud of Confucius, because of their philosophy. And also, Confucius' idea is to teach everyone, no matter how poor, how rich, or what background you have to receive a basic good education. So how do I go about it? Can you show me a roadmap in like a couple of minutes? How to do it? First step is go to the Public Design Commission, or what?
If I may, with the Parks Department, and generally speaking, the process, putting percent for art aside, what you're talking more about is sort of a publicly initiated, commissioned, if you will, and often funded effort to install permanent artwork on city property. And generally how that's handled is by the individual agency that owns that property. So if it's a DOT island, conversation would be DOT. If it's parkland, it would be with Parks. So just speaking specifically for parkland, we have our division, Arts and Antiquities, which engages with local community members constantly. They're always available. Anyone interested in the sort of process to explore whether such a donation of a permanent art piece makes sense for a given location, that's something we're always open to having conversations with the community.
So how long will it take to accomplish the whole process? A few years, or?
Well, it depends on a lot of factors. There's a lot of variables. Depends on what's proposed. It depends on what site is being, identified as whether it's feasible. Sometimes, a proposal might be duplicative of another, effort that's made elsewhere. And then specific to parklands, these are private donations of artwork. So there's a series of conversations, and those, that public citizenry, has to often sort of gather sort of funds and other sort of make sure there's consensus among, what they believe. And so that process, that, conversation, if you will, can take considerable time because sometimes a community, disagrees within itself about what they want to see represented and where and various details. So that can take significant time. Once it coalesces into a formal proposal, that process, I think, can, between, the funds that need to be raised and the process to go through, identifying a designer and all the various steps that come into place can take a couple of years, absolutely.
So if the statue is not in city parks, suppose they want to do it in a pedestrian plaza, so then they have to go to DOT or what?
Yeah, the individual agency that has jurisdiction over that given location will be the sort of lead agency in conducting that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Koo. We will now hear from Majority Leader Lori Cumbo, and I want to welcome Councilwoman Inez Barron of Brooklyn, and then she will make a statement about her bill after Majority Leader is done. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. Just wanted to talk about in the statement that was read, it spoke about, and I'm very pleased and very proud of the sculptures that you marked of Alison Saar's sculpture of Harriet Tubman, which I love, Gabrielle Coran's depictions of Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X. I also love the Duke Ellington sculpture, the New York Public Library's sculpture honoring Langston Hughes. In an instance like that, love these sculptures and love going to Harlem to see them. What is Brooklyn doing wrong that we don't have that same level of representation in our borough, where we want to have representations of our own culture in our borough? What did we do wrong?
I don't know that anything.
And what did they do right?
So a lot of these artworks came in because they're part of a capital project, and so that's and most of those capital projects were named, or there's some significant event that happened that was very easy to make it into a monument. For example, the Audubon Ballroom, Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass Circle was named Frederick Douglass Circle before we had an artwork there. So that made sense. You are getting the Shirley Chisholm that we'll be working on in Brooklyn, so.
Okay, the challenge that I have with that is like the Percent for Art program is designed around a capital project. So if you look at the Betty Saar sculpture, that seems to be in like a public plaza of sorts. So was a precedent set because that was done in a public plaza that now we can utilize public plazas as opportunities to do public art? I'll give you an example. What's currently known now as BAM Park, we're looking to rename into Betty Carter Park. So when I say I would love to have a sculpture of Betty Carter in the what's now known as the BAM Park, I get kind of that situation where everyone goes like, you got to go to that person. So it seems like there's this thing where you can't quite nail down how you go about the process of having what happened with Allison Saar's beautiful work. I want that to happen in BAM Park as well.
Well, actually, Allison Saar was part of a capital project as well. It was a DOT project that, a streetscape project that we, and so was Frederick Douglass as well. So they were both capital projects.
Because we've had a lot of plaza projects happen in Brooklyn, but no sculptures. Again, what did we do wrong? And what did Harlem do right?
Yeah, so most of the plaza projects, the Percent for Art doesn't really kick in unless it's a certain threshold in terms of the budget, of the construction budget. And so a project that is above, that's $5 million and above, is automatically eligible because, you know, the 1% is $50,000, and anything less than that, it doesn't, when you take out the artist's fee, you're not left with much to create an impact in terms of an artwork. And from my understanding is a lot of the plaza projects are very small kind of capital projects. But
that Betty Saar project looks pretty small too.
But again, that section there was just part of a bigger component, I believe. Yeah.
Let me just say this. I believe that it's important for us to create, as it pertains to plazas, and many of you may know that I've been fighting for this and working towards this, we need to create a formalized process in terms of how we review our plazas. Because it can't be this, I don't know, couple of people get in a room and decide, you know what, we should probably put some resources behind this particular project versus that particular project. I'd like to see a formalized process for the opportunity for plazas to have two things. One, a name, and two, how that community wants to realize artwork there. Because that's a wonderful opportunity, the plazas, to be able to do that.
Okay.
And I'm going to stay on that one, because that one's important to me, in terms of my final term in office. So the Percent for Art program, Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer and I worked very hard to increase the Percent for Art program. I believe, and my numbers are off, we increased the budget and the ability to be able to spend from, I believe, 1.3 million to, I believe, about 4.6 million. Since that was changed, what percentage of that are we actually realizing?
So the annual amount that we could spend per year is $4 million. That was the change. And the calculation was from calculating the percentage was 1% of the, it used to be 1% of the first 20 million, and with your help, we got up to 1% of the first 50 million, which increased our allocation for some projects per artwork.
Right.
Right. So in terms of, so that kicked in earlier last year, in 2018. Those projects were eligible to meet those calculations, and we have begin commissioning some works with the new math, and it does take, because our projects are tied to the capital project schedule, it will take a number of years to actually see the results in an actual artwork.
But did a DCLA in any way, because if we increase the amount of public art resources that are able to be spent, but we didn't provide any infrastructure for it, then if it's the same staff, same review panel, same process, same people, same execution, then you'll never really be able to realize the amount of money. And I'd like to know, where are we in that process? Because I believe we passed this legislation very early in my tenure. So I'm surprised that it hasn't ramped up to be able to provide more public art.
Yeah, again, it sort of comes in with the types of projects that we have that are being initiated through capital projects. So if it's not a gigantic project where it's, the calculations, showing a big increase, then it's just a normal kind of amount. We are doing quite a bit more, and the increase in art allocation allows us to do bigger projects or have more artists per project, let's say, and that is happening. But again, it does take a little bit of time.
I have two final questions. So I just feel like I want to see a lot more art before we leave, and I don't know how to jumpstart this process in order to make it happen. I thought that changing the budget and the amount of money would spearhead that process moving forward. So, and this might have been discussed, and I'm sure it was, with Councilmember Grodenchik, because this is his hearing, but if we have a park in our area, there's so many wonderful parks in our area, like Jackie Robinson Park, like what's going to be Betty Carter Park, all of these different parks that are just so phenomenal in our district but have no artistic markers. What's going to be the process moving forward so that these particular spaces can have permanent works of art that many of our other parks already have?
If it's a capital project, then the percent for art kicks in and we could commission a work of art.
It kicks in. Okay, here's the magic nugget in all of this. There are thousands of capital projects that are happening all across the city, thousands. How do you all pick? What is the process for which projects get pulled out and say this project will get public art funding through the Percent for Art program, like our libraries? We love Grand Army Plaza Library. That beautiful gold a sculpture outside that embellishes the doors, it's iconic. But there have also been many libraries that have received capital dollars that don't have any public art. How do you select? Because that process has to be unmystified.
Mm-hmm. So we work with our design agencies, Department of Design and Construction, EDC, SCA, to when they do have capital projects, the first thing that we do is to see what is the amount of the construction budget and see, again, like I mentioned before, if it's below 5 million, then the percentage is very low to make an impact of an artwork. And second, we have a discussion as to what is the most public-facing component of that capital project, where is it in, and then we go through the process of commissioning an artwork. We can't, for certain projects, we always try to do percent for art, whether it be a school, a library, police station, that sort of things that is very community-oriented, or projects that are community hubs, we always try to do percent for art in them, and we're doing quite a few libraries in Brooklyn and in Queens and throughout.
I feel like I'm missing out.
I could give you a list of the ones that we have, but again, if the agency does not put that project forward, sometimes we're not able to see them, but we always, as much as possible.
I feel like we have to demystify that, because we have everything from waste transfer stations to libraries to parks to major construction that's happening all throughout the city, and for us to be celebrating at this point one Shirley Chisholm sculpture in the whole borough of Brooklyn means that something is way off in terms of what's actually happening with those dollars to do those forms of public art. The last one that I will say, because I'm sure this is not happening, but this is a concept that I want to put out. I believe that the MIH program that we have as far as housing should also kick in with some form of percent for art, because what's happening is that there's so much construction and architecture that's being built in Brooklyn, New York, that is uniconic, unimaginative, boring, just nothing happening about it. These buildings that are being built in Brooklyn will never be in any kind of architectural design book of the 100 greatest anythings, right? So we need to create a way for the arts community to work with these architects in order to create a design and a building and art that is reflective of the borough, that people are going to be proud of, that's going to incorporate our history and our culture, that people are going to want to come to see, like how everybody goes to Spain to see Gaudi. They want to see the beautiful architecture and the design, something different and imaginative. Nobody's going to be coming to Brooklyn to see anything that we've built as far as our design and architecture. So I just want to put that concept out there. If a project qualifies for MIH, we should have an ability to kick in a percent for art in order to create some level of interest in the design that's happening. And those are my final comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Majority Leader Cumbo. I want to welcome our guests. I don't know where you're from, but welcome to the New York City Council. At this time, we will hear from Councilwoman Inez Barron of Brooklyn with a statement on her legislation.
Thank you to the chairs for holding this hearing, and thank you to the panel for coming. I hear I missed the commissioner, but I heard. But this is an important topic, and it deserves our time and attention. And all of those who have some impact on the decisions that are going to be made should be involved in the hearing. So I'm disappointed that the commissioner could not remain. I wanted to talk briefly about my bill, and then I do have some questions for the panel. The bill that's proposed is one that would establish a task force. Now, we know because of the pressure that had been put on the mayor for the community, particularly in East Harlem, and led by protests by persons, activists such as Viola Plummer for over 10 years, the Sims statue was removed. We know the horrific experiments that he conducted without using anesthesia on Black women that he purchased, particularly for that reason. And we know that when he perfected his experiments and used those techniques on white women, he did use anesthesia. So the blatant racism that we see in his life and in his work under the guise of a doctor was certainly more than cause to have the statue removed, and the pedestal should have gone with the man. So that did not happen then. It's still a battle that we're waging, and we do want to see that pedestal removed as well. We can't do half of the job. We've got to do all of it. He's got to be obliterated in terms of getting recognition for work that he has, experiments that he had conducted on women that were enslaved. So following the mayor's commission, there was still much work to be done. So what the bill proposes is that we establish a task force, and that this task force be charged with examining what other historical monuments and markers need to be confronted and addressed, and how we can make sure that we have a reflection of monuments highlighting people and events that talk about the humanity and talk about the goals that we say we as a nation hold great and hold in high esteem. I won't ask you to look behind you at that statue behind you. In my opinion, it needs to go, and I'm working on that as well. It's not something that I understand your commission has authority over, but I don't think we need to elevate and bring any kind of accolades to people who enslaved Africans, who raped teenage children, and who did not have any worthwhile contribution to ending the horrific conditions of slavery in America. So that's what the task force seeks to do. And I do have some questions. The task force wants to, as we say, talk about broader issues and highlight great people that represent the great goals that we have set before us. Here in this building, we are benefiting from the work of enslaved Africans, particularly here and particularly on Wall Street. It was a big battle to get a marker on Wall Street talking about the fact that the market that was engaged in was the exchange of Africans that had been kidnapped, that had been humanly trafficked and brought here. It was a big battle to get that. My question is, how are we going to ensure that as markers are added to locations that we feel are significant to our history, they acknowledge and include the work that was done by the Africans that were enslaved and brought here? There should be a marker on the gates of City Hall talking about the work that had been done to build this establishment that was done by uncompensated labor of Africans. Everything that helped to build this country should include that proviso, that acknowledgement that this was the work that was done by uncompensated labor from Africans who never received reparations. And people get nervous and talk about it being divisive to talk about the fact that we are entitled to have some kind of compensation. But how are we going to look at making sure that that happens? The contributions of enslaved Africans that built particularly this city. A lot of people did not even know that New York City had enslaved Africans, but it did. But how are we going to make sure that as we put up historical markers and monuments, the whole area of Red Hook and Fort Greene were populated and embellished and improved because of the work of Africans that were enslaved? So how are we going to make sure that when these markers go up, there's some significance to that? There was a marker at the at the Brooklyn New Lots Public Library that talked about the fact that the library itself was built on what had been an African burial ground. That marker's gone. Nobody can trace it, and nobody can tell me yet where it is. But how are we going to make sure that those kinds of acknowledgments are included and preserve them? And if you can find that marker, which was in the lobby of the library until about maybe 15 years ago, that would be great. That was a long introduction to a short question.
Well, I can speak specifically, Marjorie from Parks. I can speak specifically to historical signage that exists, on parkland, and we are very mindful, and we're very happy to work with, historical advocates and things of that nature when we are providing historical signage. And for example, the slave market marker downtown, right not too far from here, was a really important, obviously overdue, clearly, and
overdue and a fight to get it.
Yeah, I wouldn't claim credit, or I was not part of that process. I came in, frankly, it happened shortly after I arrived at the agency, so I can't, okay. But I fully believe that, I'm sure. And we thank the advocates and the elected officials who joined in that advocacy. Similarly, I think there are other properties that are parkland that have these sort of historic natures, and we do everything in our power to sort of reflect that history whenever possible. Obviously, there are other locations, historic buildings, kind of depends what entity has oversight, in terms of how that's signed. But generally speaking, I know this administration is committed to making sure that our history is properly reflected.
So is there a person who has that task to make sure that you do that research in the historical documents to be able to include that?
Yes, we have a team of historians and experts who work closely. Our Arts and Antiquities Division. Each of our historical signs that are posted are actually also available online as well, not just in person, but we also wanted it to be a resource that's available to the broader public, just interested in the history of New York City, so that the language can be mirrored, available to other people as well. And so yes, it's something that's very much on our minds.
Anybody else?
I think I'm the only representative of jurisdictional agency here, so.
Okay. Now, in terms of the 1% for art, I'm very pleased to say that there's a new high school being built in my community. The school is being valued at $111 million. How are we going to involve the students that will be in that school? It's a high school. And the principal and the staff and the community to have a decision-making voice in the art that goes into that school. It's just now, the ground is just being broken, so we're at the beginning stages of that. How are we going to make sure that what they want in the building where they will be students attending daily is what they want?
So the good thing about when we commission artwork for existing schools where there is an addition or some major renovation.
You said existing schools?
Is not an existing school?
Not yet. It was demolished and is now a new school that's being built. A brand new school is being built.
But it has existing student body and principal?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah.
Okay.
So the good thing about that is that throughout our process, these are the people we engage through even before we start having a conversation about art. And so when we do go through our process of selecting an artist, they're actually sitting on the panel and part of selecting artists to do the work. When the artist is selected, part of the artist's task is to have conversations with that student body and the principal to determine how much, to determine what the artwork actually is. So it's a very engaging process.
In the length of time that it's going to take to build a school, which is projected to be 3 years, where in that timeline does this process start?
It happens in the beginning during the design.
I don't think it's happened. I think, well, we may not be at that phase of the design, but I'll be in touch with you because I've asked about it and I've been told, well, when we get to that stage, we'll make sure that that happens. But I'm very concerned about that. And as well as talking about the fact that the monument, going back to Sims, the pedestal was a part of the monument. It wasn't always there. It had been located someplace else previously. So the fact that that pedestal remains is still an insult, and it's only half of the job, and I think we need to look at making sure that it's done, not to say, well, we'll put something else there to give the other perspective or the other side, but to make sure that that happens. So that basically was most of the questions that I had. And I thank you for your listening and for your responses. I did have another question. Where do we have the exact count of the number of statues that represent blacks, and the number of monuments that represent blacks, the number of historical markers that have reference to blacks or African Americans? You have that exact number?
The Parks Department does have a complete inventory, but that's not the city's complete inventory, obviously. So one of the outcomes of the mayor's commission was providing some funding that has come through Cultural Affairs to the PDC to do a complete inventory of the monuments. So that work is underway. We've got a good start, but we expect to have that sometime in the summer. The complete inventory of the monuments. The markers is a much larger project that we honestly don't have the resources to do the full inventory of every marker.
Do we know how many markers there are?
A lot.
So if we know how many there are, can't we find out what they say?
So that's what it takes a lot of time and research. So we can, but that's not something that we anticipate that we'll be able to do in our first round of research, but we're absolutely committed to doing that.
That might be a nice project for summer youth to work on. We talk about how we can use our youth and get them engaged and involved. That might be a way to engage them for the summer youth. Yeah.
Sure.
And lastly, Mr. Chair, thank you. The grand entrance to the Brooklyn Public Library that my colleague referred to has many indications and inclusions of African history in it and African markers, but I don't know that they are in any way acknowledged. So perhaps we can look at that and make sure that we include information that highlights what are the African icons and markers that are part of that beautiful doorway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Barron. I just want to ask, and I think somebody covered it, Matt, is there a policy at Parks and Recreation for siting statues? I mean, we have 30,000 acres of parkland, and statues generally take up, a few dozen square feet. But I know some places are more desirable, obviously. But I just wondered, is there something on paper that talks about how you actually look at a site?
So we have a set of guidelines for donating permanent artwork on parklands, which kind of spells out a pretty robust process to engage. And obviously, Parks is as primary stakeholder, with jurisdiction, obviously have a lot to say about endorsing ideas and shaping them along. But that also involves, working closely with those interested parties. I will say, generally speaking, we've also tried to be very aggressive about pursuing opportunities for temporary art, sometimes upwards of a year. And obviously, permanence has its place, and we entertain proposals of that sort. All the time, but also I didn't want to. I think it's very important to highlight there's a variety of efforts underway. Our Art in the Parks program is robust and is very much a focus as making sure that parks can stay engaging and dynamic. And so I wanted to give that. I understand it's not the topic of today's hearing, but it's a really important part of our portfolio in terms of making sure that people visiting our art and our public spaces can get an engaging and dynamic experience.
All right. I know we have the Antiquities Division. Do you have an idea what their budget is a year and what they, I know some of it is done by conservancies now, such as the statues in Central Park and other parks where there are conservancies. But I know that it's a I've seen statues all over the city now. I'm just wondering what the budget is for that.
So I don't have those budgetary information on hand. I will say that it's a moderately small team that works extremely hard, taking care of existing works and also running the temporary art program. And they work tirelessly. I have to give credit to our director, Jonathan Kuhn, and his team. We do have some conservators and other things of that nature on staff, but it's one of the reasons why most of the statuary that has been commissioned over the years was essentially sort of crowd-funded, if you will, and a lot of that often includes a maintenance endowment that's been, that's been raised that helps provide for that care. But also the agency has been quite creative about getting out there and finding grants, identifying additional opportunities. This administration, gives the agency the resources it needs, but we don't stop there. We obviously, look for every opportunity to make sure that we're taking care of this portfolio.
And you mentioned temporary art, and I love the gates. I mean, I'm dating myself a little, but it was spectacular, beyond spectacular. Can you talk about, if I had a work of art that I wanted to, you probably wouldn't allow it, but my spin art was quite wonderful, I have to. Can you talk about that process a little?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a very robust and it's all publicly available on our website. Our Art in the Parks program. We take submissions from artists all the time. In fact, we've really put a lot of work into diversifying the sites and locations at which this art is being displayed, and we're quite proud of that. Quite recently, we've worked in close partnership with Uniqlo. They funded a grant program, and we funded, I think, through that 10 locations throughout the city. Very exciting, fresh. Artistically interesting, from different voices, and so we appreciate opportunities like that, and we look for every chance. So if you're an artist and you're interested, by all means, please visit our Parks Department website and seek more information.
All right, I think Chair Van Bramer has a question.
One last thing. First of all, I just want to say, because Councilmember Borelli rightly asked some questions of Justin, I do want to say, Justin, since you've joined in your position as director of the Public Design Commission, we have had a hearing, and you have been the most accessible director that I know of in the commission. So I just want to say that.
Thank you.
And I want to say to Matt, so, I think Council Member Barron raises a lot of really, really important points, and I think we're never really going to get to where we need to be unless we actually proactively look for opportunities to change names or gain opportunities to rename things to actually bring the equity that we're looking for, right? It's not just about creating new statues or new plaques or new things. But, for example, I have an opportunity in my district, right? We've also got a lot of parks that have these really goofy names, right? That maybe Henry Stein named like 35 years ago, right? And one of mine is Bridge and Tunnel Park, right? As a kid who grew up in Queens, I've always resented the bridge and tunnel crowd thing, you know what I mean? And that's the name of a park as you enter Queens, Bridge and Tunnel Park. So as you may or may not know, Matt, I've actually raised the idea of like, why don't we rename that in honor of a woman who has great distinction in Queens or the city of New York, right? That's the kind of thing that we need to be doing more. So not just waiting, right? Like waiting. Like, why don't we actually go out there and look, survey, you know, and say, oh, this is a dopey name of a park that someone thought was cute 35 years ago, or 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And you're like, no, that has no more relevance, right? We want to actually take this as an opportunity. We have a list. There's so many women. There's so many people of color. There's so many African Americans. Like, let's do that, right? And let's do that quickly. So I don't know what the process is, but I have already raised Bridge and Tunnel Park in Long Island City, and like, let's do it.
So a couple things. One, I hail originally from New Jersey, so I'm equally offended by the name, I suppose. It's sort of two sides of that coin, I guess. But I'm happy to say that we view Bridge and Tunnel as a really exciting. It's a rather generic name, if not insulting. So I think we would like to actively work with your office and other stakeholders, you know, to kind of figure out, you know, what name makes more sense. And I'll go further and say that, you know, Commissioner Silver has thought a lot about identifying potential opportunities like this. I will note, however, in doing that, because there are sometimes names, there are duplicates, for example, you know, there's more than one, you know, blank park, you know, that does sometimes happen. However, local constituencies may have attachments to that name, even some that sound, you know, Playground 134, it doesn't sound like it, but, you know, folks who grew up in that neighborhood. So I just would only add that as a caveat, that I think we are actively looking for opportunities of that nature, because, you know, obviously monuments are not far from the only way to capture New York's history and the amount of people that should. You know, but I'll just caveat that you can, you know, obviously people have differing opinions, and that can be a very, you know, challenging conversation. And more to the point, there will always be more people who deserve renaming than there are opportunities, you know, in terms of, you know, whether that's, you know, people who of service, you know, to the city, or people who gave their lives in service for the city. Like, there'll always be more of that, you know, those. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be proactive about finding that. So we're happy to work with you about continuing those efforts.
Great, thank you.
I don't have a Bridge and Tunnel Park, but I do have a Holy Cow Playground, named after the great Yankee shortstop Phil Rizzuto, although he now has a park named after him in Richmond Hill, where he grew up. My counsel, the great Yankee fan, Steve Behar, might object, but as a Met fan, I find it a bit much. At this time, I'm going to dismiss this panel. I want to thank you for being here today, for being with us for nearly 2 hours. And I am going to call, we have two panels, and the first panel from the Municipal Arts Society, Tara Kelly; from New Yorkers for Parks, Lynn Kelly; from the Girl Scouts of Greater New York, Meredith Mascara; and representing herself, Professor Harriet Senni. I hope I got that right. Did I get that right? Senni? Rhymes with penny. Okay, thank you. The next panel after this will be Amina Ali, Judeline Cassidy, I hope I pronounced that right, Pam Elam, and Brenda Berkman. So we'll set the clock for 3 minutes, if you would, and Ms. Kelly, whichever Ms. Kelly wants to start first.
No relation, but we work together quite a bit.
No relation, I'm shocked. Okay.
Yes. Thank you to the council for inviting us to speak today. My staff has prepared wonderful testimony, but as usually, I'm going to go off the record, but on the record, and speak from my heart. Imagine that. If you'll humor me for a minute, I just want to read you a list, and I'm going to ask you at the end of this list, what do all these organizations have in common? Okay? Prospect Park, Central Park, Hudson River Park, Randall's Island Park, Snug Harbor Cultural Center, Madison Square Park, Battery Park, Flushing Meadows Park, Van Cortlandt Park, Forest Park, Union Square Park, Fort Tryon Park, Historic Harlem Parks, Bronx River Parks Alliance, Gowanus Canal Conservancy, Alley Pond Park, Downtown Alliance, Brooklyn Greenway Initiative, New Yorkers for Parks, New York Restoration Project, Design Trust for Public Space, Municipal Arts Society, Horticultural Society, the Nature Conservancy, Audubon NYC, City Parks Foundation, the Landmarks Conservancy, the Natural Areas Conservancy, and the League of Conservation Voters. Nope, wait. One better. One thing that ties the thread in 30 of the largest organizations that care for parks and the public realm in New York, they are all run by women. Every single one. Yes, that gets a hands up.
I just for the record want to state that I may be the only man in America who has worked for 4 women elected officials, 4 different ones. So
Amen. Can I say that in City Council?
you could say that in the
Yes.
City Council.
And I say this to say that as a city that aims to be equitable to all its residents, in a city where all of the largest organizations that care for the public realm, care for parks, care for quality of life for all New Yorkers, we can do better when it comes to representation in our parks for statues and for monuments. We have to do better when more than 50% of the users arguably are women. So I'm here today to both thank the council for bringing this to the attention of the administration. We commend the administration's work so far on what they're trying to do, but more has to be done. And I stand united with my fellow female leaders of all these organizations to say that we have to do better in getting representation in our parks. And I want to thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Lynn, and I want to thank you for working with me. To indulge myself here, on Thursday we will be kicking off the Play Fair campaign for parks, which seeks to raise an additional $100 million in expense funding for parks. So I hope that some of you who are listening can be with us Thursday at high noon. This is just the beginning of what will be a multi-year campaign to raise additional funding for parks. And I thank you for working with me on that. And thank you for your comments today.
Thank you, Councilman.
Ms. Kelly?
Hi, thank you. Good morning, almost afternoon. I'm Tara Kelly, representing the Municipal Art Society of New York. We have been one of the watchful guardians over New York City's architecture and public art since 1893. Following its founding premise of commissioning and endorsing public art, MAS in 1987, in partnership with the Public Design Commission and the Parks Department, launched the Adopt a Monument program to restore 20 of the most threatened statues in the 5 boroughs damaged by pollution, neglect, and vandalism. The MAS sought corporations, foundations, and private funders to underwrite the cost of each conservation. Success led to the second partnership with the city, the Adopt a Mural program, initiated in 1991. To date, 52 works of public art have been rescued, restored, and importantly maintained. The artworks are far-ranging in location, style, and material, representing an investment of $4 million to the city. Included among these is the magnificent Beaux-Arts ceiling mural in this very chamber room, New York receiving the tributes of the nations, as well as iconic sculptures in your neighborhoods. Some of these are Lincoln and Lafayette monuments in Prospect Park, Rocket Thrower in Flushing Meadows, Heinrich Heine in Joyce Kilmer Park in the Bronx, and the Neptune Fountain in Snug Harbor, Staten Island. Thus, MAS greatly appreciates the attention of City Council to this very important matter of today's hearing, especially relevant in recent years. The city's track record for commemorating people of color and women has improved greatly since 1945, when only 2 non-white male representations existed in figurative statuary. Today, of the 118 sculptures of individuals, 23 represent people of color or women. While progress has been made, indeed, the city has not gone far enough. And so we're here to support you in that effort. We ask the new task force take note that figurative public art has been on the wane in the 21st century, and therefore urge the task force to think beyond bronze and stone in telling our city's untold stories. We also believe that the charge of this task force should be as broad as possible in order to seize the incredible momentum towards equity. Every art form should be plumbed for its inherent ability to reflect the city and its rich narratives. Beyond formal art, park names, street signs, temporary installations, and celebrations are all ways of amplifying this history. On a more specific note, we respectfully ask that the chair of the Landmarks Preservation Commission, rather than the executive director, and the chair of the Public Design Commission both be appointed to the proposed task force. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Mascara?
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for the committee for letting me be here. I'm Meredith Mascara, the CEO of the Girl Scouts of Greater New York. I'm not only here testifying on behalf of myself, my 5 daughters, but most importantly on behalf of the 31,000 Girl Scouts here in New York City. I was actually a little disappointed that I couldn't bring a girl with me today to testify, but it is the first day back from public schools from vacation until I started hearing the PDC talking earlier, and I would not want my girls to hear that this has been deprioritized and put off for way too long. And we need to stop. We need to do something about it now and reprioritize the work of the commission. And after listening to them, the need for oversight, these laws, and transparency is so clear. And if the PDC is not willing to prioritize this, the City Council needs to. It's insulting. It's insulting to all of us. I have girls who have been organizing since 2016, working with the Statue Fund, who have made more progress than the commission here has. They raised money through their cookie sales. They have advocated and rallied and worked to get a statue of the suffragettes put up in Central Park, and it is put on pause. Okay. And I have to answer to those girls, and I have to tell them that all of the work that they have done is put on pause and may not happen until after they graduate. And I'm telling you right now, these girls need answers now, and you need to make sure that the commission is, and this administration is accountable to making sure this work is done and that there is fair and equitable representation of women and tell the right history and story of New York City. Even walking into this building, when I bring Girl Scouts here, I have to explain to them that this is not actually what represents New York City. This is not what represents what women have contributed to the greatness of New York City, and to tell them that they do have a place here. And it's wonderful for them to be able to see the women who actually are working here now, even though we need more of you, but they need to see it in every shape and form across this city. So please be accountable for that. Let our girls have representation, and just make sure that this happens sooner than keep getting put off. We're tired of waiting. Thank you.
We share your frustration on many levels, and I thank you for being here today. It's always good to see a resident of Queens testifying. I know Lynn is not from Queens. That's okay. It's a big city. We've been joined at this time also
in the house.
By Councilman Ben Kalos of Manhattan. And we will now hear testimony from Professor Seni.
Good morning. Thanks for this opportunity.
Can you turn that?
Does that do it?
That does it.
I don't usually need it in a classroom. I'm an art historian by training. I work at City College. I direct a master's program in art history and art museum studies. I've written extensively on public art, especially on memorials, but also on controversy. I was a member of the Mayor's Advisory Commission on City Art Monuments and Markers. I can address our thinking about the Sims base later if you like. I was also a member of the She Built New York Advisory Commission. We did suggest alternative forms that some of these memorials might take. That is the idea that we could honor groups of women, for example, women in politics, that would span history, as well as significant individuals. I was happily a member of the selection committee for the Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton Memorial, scheduled to be in Central Park, which will put 2 actual women there. Also on the selection committee for Flight 587 in Rockaway Park, remember that one? And a little further afield to the memorial to the 1968 student uprisings in Mexico City. My comments today are based on caveats of process, and they're based on my experience of serving on these various public bodies. I'm leery of a quota system in any arena, although I'm an ardent fan, supporter, feminist, et cetera, of more representation of women. My concern is how this quota would be implemented. Would commissions have to alternate by gender, or would there be a catch-up period at the end of the year to balance the numbers? Either way, communities might be denied the ability to celebrate worthy individuals, even, dare I say it, white men. And might it also lead to a selection of women who are perhaps somewhat questionable choices in order to fill the quota? I'm sure there are other problematic issues, but these are the ones that immediately jump to mind. My concern with the task force, again, something I heartily support, is that it might not adequately consider either the past or the future. Based on spending more time with controversies than probably any healthy person should, my conclusion is that they're largely, and I think the words were sustained by negative attention, that these would get the most attention. Controversy is by its nature political. It's not always easy to ascertain what the actual agenda is and how much local support for protests there actually is. So it's been my experience that sustained negative attention may not indeed be representative of overall community response. And I think any investigation and analysis of such a protest would be critical. Sometimes it's spearheaded by somebody with that passion. There was more, but
That's all right.
that's it.
That's okay. I think Chair Rosenthal has a question for the panel.
And perhaps it'll be answered more quickly than I expected, but except for being on the committee, do you have recommendations for, or did all of you hear about the call for statues depicting women? The administration said they got the word out to everyone, and everyone submitted. I'm just wondering if your organization knew about it.
I can speak for the Girl Scouts. We first heard about it, honestly, from our girls who joined working with the Statue Fund over 3 years ago. And, you know, that was a choice that they did as a community project to make sure that there was fair representation.
But that's this particular Statue Fund?
Correct.
I mean the administration.
And then we were invited in to, because of the shared sentiment for She Built NYC, with much enthusiasm, only to not hear anything after the initial announcement about our further participation in that.
Okay. Anyone else?
I want to take one step back, Councilwoman. So I actually started my career at what was called the Art Commission at the time, which is now the Public Design Commission. I was in this deputy director spot many moons ago. And so what I can speak from personal experience and then kind of translate to that question today is, I think several members of the council, particularly Councilmember Kumbo, brought up this issue of process, right? Like how to get back. Let's put aside the question of the task force right now, but look at more of the overall process. It's almost unfair to pin down on cultural affairs and to the design commission about where things may or may not have been bungled in the current process. What it really takes is a decision from the top about how expense dollars on construction projects will be allocated and spent. And so those organizations are, doing their jobs and carrying out direction. And when I was in that role, it was only how projects were delineated, whether they were prioritized or not, to have public art in them. That's why there's not necessarily, just because the number is X amount, that it's going to get this amount, Y amount public art as from % for art. And the other piece of it is, to really have a robust public art program like other cities do internationally and even East Coast cities, you have to be willing as a city to invest the expense dollars in the agencies that carry out those public projects. When you have one or two people running % for art and you have hundreds and hundreds of major capital construction projects citywide, there's an inequity there from the beginning. So I commend my colleagues for the work that they do. I mean, I want to say Jonathan Krawchuk is here, who spent his career, as long as I've known him, caring for our sculptures in New York City, would voluntarily send his crews to Snug Harbor when I was running it to clean our Neptune fountain that was mentioned. This is like, yeoman's work. But in order, and this gets back to our campaign council member, in order to really care for our city's parks and monuments and do right by parks, we have to play fair with the budget for parks, and we have to play fair with the process. And we're not right now, and we can do better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Chair Van Bramer?
So I thank you, and Lynn, you know we're big fans from your various positions, and I appreciate what you said, which is also further from our perspective why we're disappointed what happened earlier, because we could have asked about the budget for the Department of Cultural Affairs and the budget for the Percent for Art program, not the budget that Lori and I fought to increase, but actually the expense and administrative budget to actually make it go faster and make it be better, which you know is tough. And as I said publicly, Kendall is an incredibly smart and good person who does great work. Meredith, I as you were talking, I had an idea about something we might be able to do jointly with the girls to publicly make this process go faster. And as you have done so amazingly, both locally and then citywide, with empowering girls and making activists and agitators and future leaders, there may be things that we can do together that publicly make this go faster, and it's not the job necessarily of 8-year-old girls to make the city of New York do what it should, but few things can motivate the city of New York better than some really empowered 8, 9, and 10-year-old girls to do the right thing. So look forward to talking with you more about that.
Thank you. I want to thank the panel. I also would like to ask Professor Seni if you could send us a copy, if you have, of your testimony.
I'd be happy to do that.
So we could have that for the record. And at this time, I'm going to dismiss this panel, and thank you for your insight. It was, oh, I'm sorry, Majority Leader.
Thank you. Just wanted to add as well my support for the Girl Scouts. It's just an incredible organization, and to see our young girls fighting so hard for their future to see representations is certainly admirable. I just wanted to touch on both the concepts that you brought up in terms of when you have an opportunity to travel nationally as well as internationally, you really see, ironically, how far behind New York City is within the public art realm. And when we have opportunities to see projects like the Gates or the Cow Parade or all of these different elements that really create fanfare in New York City, it's still amazing that we don't invest the way that we should in public art because of what it does for our cities. But I did want to address the comment around the quota, particularly because you're on the commission. I totally don't see this quota as a quota. I really see it as an opportunity to level the playing field and really an opportunity for us to put a particular focus on righting and historic wrong. And I think that the challenge of, and I'm just going to speak stereotypically, everyone forgive me, the challenge of being a woman is that we have the opportunity to see full circle, and we have this deep desire often to be inclusive and to think about how can we all play fair in the sandbox? How can we make sure that everybody has an opportunity? And I think that there are many great white men, but I believe that it's important for us now in order to create a level playing field and then to have an opportunity at a later time to reintroduce great white men into the dialogue and the conversation. But I think it's fair and equitable to say they've had their time, they've had a great run, and when we look at a dynamic like last night at the Oscars, what an incredible historic evening where we really saw that talent and creativity is the gift that God gives all races and all cultures. And to be able to see that last night where you would go to watch the Oscars. I had stopped watching the Oscars because I had just seen, well, we're not going to win, and we're just going to go back home and be disappointed. So I think it was that those types of changes in our dynamic are so important for people to see. It's important for people to see representations of themselves, and it really just makes our culture and our society a much better, richer, fairer, more equitable, less violent place when everybody sees themselves there.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I appreciate your comments. The point that I was trying to make was really one related to process, to make sure that this is done in a way that doesn't end up with results that don't address those issues. And my comment about white men had more to do with let's stay inclusive. Let's not by definition exclude anybody, even if they've had the entire pie almost up till now, because then we've got a historical vacuum for the period of time in which we're leveling the playing field, and I'm on that team 100%.
We can agree to disagree on that one.
Totally.
I just feel that in your particular role, it's, and here's the other thing about it. This process that DCLA is talking about is like a faucet that's dripping so slowly.
I think it's that staffing
Drip.
issue that really...
It's a real one.
So, I mean, if it's a matter of like a few drips or a drip every 2 or 3 years, which is unfathomable. I mean, when we look at the amount of public art that's in the city of New York, at one time, I don't know, dozens, hundreds of sculptures had to be built or created in 1 or 2 years.
City Beautiful movement.
Right? So this is really an opportunity for us to fast forward this process and to really hone in on some great and dynamic people. And it's okay to agree to disagree.
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled with this support for public art. I just want to say, when I first started researching this area and I looked it up in the card catalog, I got the art of public speaking. No joke.
Thank you all for your testimony today. It was most insightful. I do want to say one of the most teachable moments in my life, I was with my mother-in-law, who is a young woman from Brooklyn, although she now lives in Queens, and I was with her the day that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was nominated for the Supreme Court. And she pretty much did what Professor Seni did. She cried. She literally cried, and I understood it because it was her going to the Supreme Court. And I know for the first time now we have an Attorney General who's a woman of color, and she has taken the hopes and dreams of millions of women of color in this state and around the nation. I look forward to the day when something like that is not news. We've got work to do, obviously, and I want to thank you all for being here today. And I'm going to dismiss you now with a wave of my hand and welcome the next panel. Ms. Cassidy, Ms. Elam, Ms. Berkman, and Ms. Ali. Only one.
It's a part of, she's got it right there.
Which one is the top button?
I think they're all on.
Ms. Cassidy, if you'd like to begin.
No.
Oh, okay, you're going to tell me what you're going to do. Okay.
Sorry.
I take instruction. My wife won't believe this, but I do take instruction well at times.
Well, actually, the three of us are from the same organization.
Okay.
We're going to divide our testimony in thirds to meet your time schedule.
You
So
can have,
We literally will go in this direction.
okay. Take your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to testify on proposals to make the city's process for creating monuments more transparent and fair. We approach those issues from a unique vantage point. I'm Pam Elam, president of the Stanton and Anthony Statue Fund, and our Monumental Women campaign. Board members Brenda Berkman and Judaline Cassidy and I are here today to offer a brief overview of our 5-year experience as an all-volunteer, tax-exempt charity dealing with the city to break the bronze ceiling in Central Park, to create the first statue of real women in the park's 165-year history. Monumental Women, our campaign, is a 3-part project to increase the awareness and appreciation of the vast and varied contributions women have made to history, as well as to challenge municipalities across the country to reimagine their public spaces to honor more women and people of color. Little did we know that we would have to challenge our own municipality to make that happen. Part 1 of our project, as I've said, is to create the first statue of real women in Central Park, New Yorkers Stanton and Anthony. But that statue is only the first of many that we'll propose throughout New York City. Part 2 includes a women's history education campaign to tell the stories of all women, all the incredible women that our history books and history classes omitted. And we're in partnership with the New York Historical Society to create new curriculum and online resources for students and teachers, as well as programs, conferences, and exhibitions for the public. Part 3 is the challenge to municipalities that I referenced. And the timing is right as we get ready to celebrate the National Women's Suffrage Centennial and the 200th anniversary of the birth of Susan B. Anthony, both in 2020. New York City could be at the center of the nation's celebration of those 2 monumental events in 2020, and we would be pleased to work with the City Council to make that happen. We're also pleased to announce today that the Statue Fund has successfully reached our $1.5 million budget goal for the first phase of our efforts. We thank the over 1,000 individual donors who've supported us, as well as foundations and companies like the Ford Foundation, the American Express Foundation, the Jane Walker Campaign, and Old Navy, who see the vital importance of our work. We especially want to extend our thanks to New York Life for both the extraordinary $500,000 challenge grant and for believing in us. The only city money we have received came from a $100,000 capital fund grant from Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, who has been our steadfast supporter, and from a member item from Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, for which we're very grateful. We also thank the members of the Council's Women's Caucus for 2 wonderful letters of support we've received over the last several years.
So I'm Brenda Berkman, and I'm a retired New York City fire captain, and I'm a member of the board of directors of the Statue Fund and Monumental Women. And as Pam said, we are a nonprofit charity, completely privately funded. And there's been a lot of questions today about what is the process for getting a work of art into a public park. And I want to give you a few details about our process so you understand the great difficulty that we have had in terms of over 5 years trying to make this happen. So first we had to, challenge the New York City governmental bureaucracy and its often unwritten rules. And I was very pleased to hear the questioning from the City Council about making the process way more transparent. It's not easy to donate a work of art to the city in New York, especially when that work of art is of real women. We want to give you several quick examples of the many challenges. First, the Parks Department and the New York City Park Conservancy said absolutely not to adding a statue of real women to Central Park, arguing that the statues in Central Park represent a historical collection and will be no new ones. We persisted. Then they said, why don't you pick another park? Are you sure you want a statue? Why not a garden? We persisted. Then they said something that the advocates of past Central Park statues never were told. We should find evidence of Anthony and Stanton actually being in Central Park. We found that evidence. Then, thanks to Parks Commissioner Mitchell Silver, the statue was approved, but was given a location on the outskirts of the park.
We persisted, and a beautiful site on the mall was dedicated on November 6, 2017. In addition, we've had to adhere to rules requiring our statue to match the 19th century aesthetic of the other statues on the mall. Finally, the many very strict requirements for placement of the statue on the mall were ironed out. Then came our interaction with the Public Design Commission, which started last October. From the very beginning, our intent with the statue design competition was to find a compelling way of including many contributing voices from the suffrage movement, in addition to those of Stanton and Anthony. Our jury was selected to bring a diverse set of viewpoints to the process, and those jury members unanimously selected the design of nationally known artist Meredith Bergman. Parks, Central Park Conservancy, and the Public Design Commission representatives were involved the entire time. Only late last year did we hear any reservations about the current design, and it appears that if we want to have PDC approval, we need to remove some of the aspects of the design we believe to be the most inclusive, especially the 22 additional quotes on the scroll in the ballot box. We, of course, want PDC approval.
Hi, thank you. Hi, my name is Judlyn Cassidy. I'm a plumber from Plumbers Union number 1, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit called Tools and Tiaras. And recently we were pleased that the PDC Commission stated most emphatically that they believe that Anthony and Stanton were certainly deserving of being honored in their own right with a statue in Central Park as abolitionists, suffrage, and women's rights pioneers. The PDC commissioners said that no number of individuals, no matter how wordy, could truly represent a whole movement. Thus, in an effort to complete our original goal of honoring all women, we now offer another idea to the City Council. We propose that New York City create a women's rights trails encompassing all the 5 boroughs. This trail will consist of statues, garden, plaques, street signs, and historic homes, museums, exhibitions, and other tributes to honor the diversity of women, especially those who fought for suffrage and for women's rights. We look forward to working with many partners, including the City Council and the newly created She Built New York, to make New York City Women's Rights Trail a reality. And thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you so much for being here today. We may have some questions for you, but first we're going to hear from Ms. Ali.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Give a woman a fish and she'll probably ask you where you got it from so she can feed her tribe. I am Amina Ali. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I represent UN Women for the Gambia. I am a Gulf War veteran, and I am a Muslim African-American woman living here in New York. I come representing sovereign tribes, international cultures, and the voice of the indigenous people of New York. And I speak to the point that women are the first teachers in all religions, as nurturing is the first lesson learned. Independent moms, and we're getting away from the single moms because her marital status has nothing to do with her parenting. But independent moms raise the children regardless of accompaniment because she realizes that that is her sworn duty to that child. Even sports greats often seem to shout out, "Hi, Mom," when in camera view. So consciously or unconsciously, women are wanting to be inclusive, not be a part of anything. Because we are the first teachers of this language in any religion, any culture, or any tribe, the value and the importance of women are seen. It is only when we come into a political or a transgressed governmental entity that it seems that that lesson or that view is askewed. It is important that we remember this in our communities, as we are the ones that are favored to the respective times that we have in our community. For example, most women go to grocery stores, they go to parks. They are outside in the communal life more often than men are, as they are the breadwinners and subsequently, traditionally, was at work most of the time. So it only makes sense that if we're in the community as women, as representatives, that we see things that represent us. Since we are the ones that are given the opportunity to be in that space and occupy that at most, why is it that we have to be reminded of those that may not be there all the time? I think that most of us that will agree that when we come in front or come in view of things we do culturally and tribally, women are the number one piece that we see. But more importantly, and more to the point, approving of this will open the doors for representations of those in the military that I've yet to hear mentioned in this panel. Those that are of indigenous cultures and are indigenous traditions, as well as sovereign traditions. These are things that will hopefully open the door and open the way to us having those representations as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ali, and I want to thank you all. It's quite shocking to me. Central Park is one of the world's great public spaces, and there are many, many statues there, and I've had this conversation with both of my co-chairs today. It's shocking to me that there is not a single statue of a woman who actually existed, who didn't have to be created as a fictional work of art. So I don't know if Councilman Van Bramer or Councilwoman Rosenthal have questions at this time. Nope. Okay.
Actually, sorry, quick question. First of all, I do have a quick question. No. Just for the Monument Committee, are you guys clear about what your next steps are?
Well, the three-part program that I initiated in terms of a discussion is the whole continuation. You know, this statue's only the first one. We are going to have many others. The Women's History Education Campaign has already started, and you'll see the rollout of it as we get closer and closer to the unveiling of our statue on the Mall on August 26, 2020. The challenge to municipalities all across the country will happen that very day when we have the unveiling ceremony, and it will continue as long as we can privately fundraise to keep ourselves going. As I've said, we're all volunteers. By the time of the unveiling, we will have spent 7 years of our lives trying to make this happen, but we're committed to spend a lifetime to increase the awareness and the appreciation of women's history and the history of all women.
I should have started by saying thank you.
Well, I would like to finish by saying thank you, and we want to work with the council because there's so much together we could do to make this celebration in 2020 quite remarkable, and the council could help take the lead on that, and we would join you in full partnership.
So Pam is too modest to say this, but many years ago, she not only spearheaded the street naming out here for Stanton and Anthony, but also put together for Manhattan this list of 120 women's history sites. And it's because she was working in Manhattan, right, for Manhattan politicians. But we anticipate that we would like to do similar kinds of things for the other boroughs, recognizing, unfortunately, Councilmember Cumbo left, but recognizing that Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, the Bronx have been left out of the equation in many cases, and at least being able to push and work with those communities to recognize women and people of color in their public spaces. So this is, this is sort of old school now. Not that it's not needed, but I've been working with projects like talking statues and digital work, and then of course with the New York Historical Society and with Wikipedia. So I would urge the council not only to look at how do we physically memorialize women and people of color in public spaces, but then how do we provide the full accounting of history about why those things are there. How many monuments have you walked by and you have no idea who these people are, right? And so can we educate the public in many different perspectives, not from many different perspectives, not just putting a piece of rock or bronze there, but also doing the hard work to bring forth the actual history of these people.
I guess I was asking, so I agree with you, and thank you. I was asking a sort of simplistic question of, is the Monument Fund yourselves, are you on a track to move forward that is clear, a path forward?
Clear?
That's clear now.
Well, we're very clear on it. Well, the short answer to a long process, we enter our 6th year, is that you heard testimony earlier today saying that the Public Design Commission only takes 2 or 3 months. We're in month number 5 and counting. You know, what we've described to you in a very brief way has demonstrated obstacles at every possible step. And at this point, who wouldn't agree that we need more statues of women? We're supplying the money, we're supplying the work, everybody's working with us pro bono. Why can't we get some cooperation?
And so does PDC have an end date? Have they told you this will come out of the commission in the next 2 months? Or?
Well, we know their next hearing, which we have applied to be on the agenda, is March 18th. Okay. We're hopeful that they can combine both a conceptual and preliminary level of approval at that hearing, but we have not heard a response to our request for that yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. To answer your question, there are plenty of statues that I have to go back when I'm touring. I'm a parks chair, so I get to a lot of parks, and there are people I have literally never, forget about, I've never heard of them, let alone know what they did or what they stood for. And that may be because, you know, some of these statues have been in place for over 100 years, and they did not hold up to the scrutiny of history, or they just, you know, they may still be important to people, but they're just not as well known as they might have been a long, long time ago. We have been joined by 2 of our colleagues, Councilman Andy King from the great borough of my birth, the Bronx, and Councilman Eric Ulrich from my home borough of Queens. I think Councilman King wanted to make a statement.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you because the way you treat parks is like you treat your home, and you take care of it very well, so I say thank you for that. Also, I want to just put on the record, I'd like to get an idea from you all as you've advocated for statues, and this is something I would like to see the council get more engaged in, of how do we able to be a part of funding statues ourselves if we're not at that level, because no one's ever said to me, hey, listen, can you help us fund a statue of so-and-so or such of this person we're trying to, you know, get a statue built of. The city of New York is very diverse, as we always say it is. Then all our statues, wherever they are, our art should reflect that in every way, and not being afraid to tell the story of New York or the world. As bad as some of it is, there's a lot of greatness in it as well. And I would definitely like to see, you know, my 9-year-old granddaughter walk down the street and see a statue of someone she can appreciate because it's a reflection of her story as well. We know what it is. America one day did not look at everyone the same. So we're not reflected, and some of the statues, you know, kind of put us all on blast when you start telling the story of who that person actually is. Then we find out the name of that school, the name of that person, how they actually live, you know, essentially is demoralizing and unacceptable today. So we need to make sure that we have artwork that's reflective, tells our story, but us not being afraid to say these are the great things in the city of New York, and these are some of the things that we're not proud of, but everyone needs to know about it so we can move forward. When we try to throw stuff underneath the rug, it's that underlying energy, negative energy that always surfaces when we don't talk about something. So having these monuments and statues being built to tell our story, I think it's a great way to reflect and educate ourselves. Would you be able to tell me, in all the advocacy work and the money that you use, how long, 'cause I know the system takes a minute to get stuff done sometimes, but if you were to say I wanted to erect a statue, how long would you think it would take for you to get a statue built after finding a location and get it erected?
Well, the plan that we have, and we're very fortunate to have project managers, the highly respected firm of Beyer Blinder Bell, Right now, because there's been such a delay with the Public Design Commission, we're behind schedule. We need to have approval and move forward to the development of the full statue. We've had the maquette, we're working on the 1/3 size figure and moving to the large figure, and then go to the foundry and all the other steps. The short answer is, if we get that design approval immediately, we can make our deadline of August 26th. So we issued our RFQ, RFP on November 6, 2017. We selected the winner in July of 2018. We are moving forward with the approvals, and it takes 2 more years from that time. So I would say realistically 4 years.
4 years.
And Councilmember King, keep in mind too that, you know, our project is privately funded for the most part.
Okay.
And for a lot of communities, it's going to take them a long time to raise that money. We were very fortunate to be able to raise $1.5 million that was needed in order to both construct and then maintain the statue in Central Park, plus do our education campaign. So the money raising part for private groups can be quite daunting. GoFundMe or whatever, aside.
But if you add the help of the City Council and the active participation and advocacy of New York City government, you can cut the 4 years to 2.
Right, and that's why I say to Mr. Chair, let's figure out, Mr. Chair, how do we come together as a council to offer fund support, and maybe we can look to erect 5 new statues in each borough, you know, doing our tenure here to say that we're doing our part and streamline, fast track this stuff. There's no reason stuff needs to, when we know it's the right thing to do, we shouldn't, our bureaucracy should get in the way of us doing the right thing. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for leading today's conversation, and thank you, ladies, for all your advocacy and what y'all doing and speaking truth to power. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman King. I want to thank this panel for their insight and for your work, especially Captain Berkman, for your service to the City of New York as a fire captain. I know that is a very, very difficult job and one of great distinction. I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank my co-chairs, Helen Rosenthal of the Women's Committee and Jimmy Van Bramer of that committee with a very long name. And I also want to know that we are going to enter into the record testimony of Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, which she gave before the Public Design Commission on October 15, 2018, and 2 letters from the Women's Caucus of the City Council from the last term of the City Council, one on June 20th, 2017.
One sec. I think someone has something to add.
Okay.
If we could just recognize her.
Ms. Ali, did you want to add something?
Actually, it's kind of out of place now, but more to the council member's point, you talked about community and that we are community, but I remember Ellis Island was mentioned as a reminder, which is another statue of a woman, that is a reminder of the communities that came aboard these shores. And because of that, we were more inclusive as a people in those communities. I remember a time when we used to represent Miss Johnson's baby girl or Miss Jackson's young one, and now we're representing communities. I'm from Brooklyn, I'm from the Bronx, so we kind of lost that efficacy of representing family and what we were. And I think that holds a great tangent to the communities and the cultures that I represent, to be able to bring that back together and to be a cohesive need and have a statue in your community that represents your community. And I don't see how hard that is if the people are duly noted to be able to be represented. And I think that's the bigger piece, that we're not really represented as a truth, we're represented as a demographic of fact. So it's not really tangible to see how people have the power that we're asking for if we're not seen as the people that you mentioned in history that weren't represented initially when the rules of engagement were written. So I think sometimes we have to see that and understand that in partnership with what it is that we're designing, that if we don't see people as human, there isn't a humanistic factor.
20 years old.
I relent.
I thank you for that. I just want to add that in addition to Borough President Brewer's testimony, we're going to enter into the record 2 letters from the Women's Caucus of the previous term of the council dated June 20th. It was addressed to Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Silver, and another letter of October 6, 2014, also addressed to Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Silver about this topic. At this time, seeing no other questions from this panel, I want to thank everybody who was here today and for advancing this conversation along. You can be sure that we'll be following this most intensely, and we look forward to working with everybody who participated today to diversifying our monuments and our statues to be more reflective of this great city of New York. And with that, at 12:43, I am going to close this hearing. Thank you all.